will guide you to a survey. Please complete the survey in order to receive a certificate for your participation. Finally, the session is being recorded. Information on how to access the recording will be sent out once the webinar is posted, and please feel free to share that widely. My name is Carrie Doima. Next slide, please. My name is Carrie Doima, and I'm at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I'll be the moderator of today's session. I'm delighted to have with me Adrienne Dwar from the Washington State Department of Early Learning and Erin Peniston from the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Each presenter will introduce themselves when they start their presentation. Before we get started, let's find out a little bit more about those of you on the phone. Next slide, please. Please select your role that best describes you. And if you have an other response, please type that in the chat box if you wish. Do we have any poll results yet?
We do. So far, 42% are saying state agency, 47% technical assistance provider, 14% advocate at the state level. And I've got some other folks saying advocates at the state level, family support, national nonprofit staff, consultant to the CDC. Maybe 56% of folks have voted. So get your votes in.
Okay, we'll give you a couple more seconds. Thank you for your participation. Let's move on to the next slide. Moving on to our session objectives, which you see on the screen. Today we will learn a little bit more about that ECE, obesity prevention work in Washington and Maryland. Next slide, please. I will ask questions to the presenters, and they will share their state's experiences, alternating throughout the presentation. I'll first start by asking Adrienne from Washington, what made your state prioritize physical activity and nutrition for young children? Go ahead, Adrienne.
Adrienne, if you're there, you might need to hit #52#.
Adrienne, we can't hear you. Are you there?
Shoot.
Adrienne?
Sorry, folks, just one moment. It looks like she's having trouble connecting to audio.
Carrie, this is Erin. Can you hear me?
Yes. Why don't we skip ahead a few slides to slide
right there.
There we go. Oh, back there. There you go. Adrienne, thanks so much. Sorry, Erin. Thanks so much.
Sure. We'll just give Adrienne a minute or two to jump on. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erin Peniston, and I'm the Deputy Director with the Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Control at the Maryland Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. I've worked in chronic disease prevention nearly 8 years, and during this time have been really fortunate to serve as the Health Department's main liaison with our State Department of Education and lead a lot of our child care and school wellness related activities. And looking at how we began to really prioritize this work, from 2008 through 2010, the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene convened a legislatively mandated Committee on Childhood Obesity that was tasked to develop recommendations for addressing childhood obesity within the state. The committee's 12 recommendations focused on policy and environmental change, healthcare, public awareness, and infrastructure, and included the 2 recommendations highlighted at the bottom of the slide, which both focused on the child care setting. These recommendations really served as a guiding framework for Maryland's early childhood obesity prevention efforts, with a key focus on ECE settings, and helped build upon the momentum of local school wellness policies, existing partnerships between health and education, and other statewide evaluation efforts. Over the past few years, the implementation of these recommendations has been informed by the literature around childhood wellness and national recommendations on early childhood obesity prevention strategies, such as those including in the Caring for Our Children standards, Let's Move Child Care, and the CDC Spectrum of Opportunities for Obesity Prevention in Early Care and Education, which we'll hear more about later into the webinar. So I'll turn it over to Adrienne.
Hey, folks, we're still working out the audio concerns there. Sorry, it'll be just one moment. In the meantime, I wanted to take an opportunity to share with you the poll results, just so we know who's here today.
And if it's helpful, we could skip to slide 8, and I could talk about CDC Spectrum of Opportunities, which Erin alluded to. Great. So Erin alluded to some of their work around the CDC's framework, which is called the Spectrum of Opportunities for Obesity Prevention in Early Care and Education. This framework provides a blueprint for states and communities to help early care and education providers meet national best practice standards. If you're not familiar with the spectrum, there are 11 avenues, which are each represented by the different colors on the spectrum, and they are ways that states can pursue embedding obesity prevention into their existing state systems. There are areas such as licensing in red, or quality rating improvement in purple, or technical assistance in teal. More information about the Spectrum of Opportunities and all other CDC resources can be found on our website. Adrienne, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Great. Thanks everyone for holding out those technical difficulties, and I'll let Adrienne take it away in talking about how Washington has prioritized early care and education obesity prevention.
Thanks so much, everybody. It seems like technical difficulties is my name. So I'm Adrienne Dorff, and I'm the Healthiest Next Generation Program Manager with the Washington State Department of Early Learning. And the Department of Early Learning is the child care licensing agency in Washington State. And prior to my current position, I spent 14 years as a child care health nutrition consultant with the local health jurisdiction in Seattle and King County. And I work for the organization I work for is part of an initiative called the Healthiest Next Generation Initiative. And it came about because of a shared interest in childhood obesity prevention between our Governor, Jay Inslee, and our Secretary of Health, John Weisman. And they really wanted this to be a positive initiative with a focus on promoting healthy eating and physical activity, and not focusing so much on childhood obesity or overweight prevention. And they recognize that improving children's health requires many different solutions and many efforts by many organizations and people. And they really wanted the initiative to focus on places where children spend their time. Next slide, please. So the initiative actually started as a bill, which didn't pass, but amazingly the funding went forward. And so it established 3 positions that were going to focus on early learning settings, schools, and communities. And it funded a position at the Department of Health, the Department of Early Learning, and our Department of Education. And so we are working together to make a difference in our agencies and with the populations that we work with. The Healthiest Next Generation initiative is sort of expanding now beyond childhood obesity prevention to include many different components of children's health, and it's sort of become a brand and a communication platform for improving children's health.
Great. Now we'll have Washington talk about some of the activities or strategies that you're working on and how you implement. So one more slide, please.
Great. Well, we've been doing a lot of things here in Washington, and I want to share them with you because they're exciting. I think when I came into this position, I recognized that I was a health person working in an education organization. And so although the organization is interested in improving health outcomes, they're also really focused on education. So I recognized I really needed to partner with people in my agency and really make things a win-win situation for all of us. So one of the first things that came my way is the new Child Care Development Block Grant health requirements for pre-service training for child care providers. So there were a number of topics that needed to be included in pre-service training required by CCDF, and those were things like medication management, food allergy management, safe sleep. And so I approached our professional development folks and said, you know, I'm willing to talk to my colleagues in other agencies and organizations and rely a lot on Caring for Our Children 3rd edition, and I will be willing to write those new curriculum requirements into the, we call it Child Care Basics in our state, our pre-professional training. I'll be willing to do that if, while I'm doing that, I can also add in more information about healthy eating and physical activity, and they just jumped at it and said, great. So I wrote a lot of sections I wasn't an expert on, but I relied on my community, other community organizations and my collaborators to help me. And so that was the first win-win that I had. So now our pre-service curriculum includes more information around healthy eating and physical activity, and I'm really excited about that. So another thing that happened is prior to the time I actually came onto DEL, I was so excited about all of the trainings I saw for Let's Move childcare as well as NAPSAC, and I really wanted to make those available to Washington State early learning providers. But I soon found out that the Department of Early Learning required that any training that was offered for credit, we call them STARS credits here in our state, had to have a trainer associated with them. And the national trainings don't have a trainer associated with them. Specifically, some do. I think Better Kid Care has a trainer, but many of the Let's Move did not. So I was talking with Amy Ellings at our Department of Health, and she used, I think, some of her 1305 funds to contract with the University of Washington Center for Public Health Nutrition. And they created some really wonderful online trainings based on Let's Move, and we have trainings on healthy eating, physical activity, breastfeeding, and we're working on one on family-style dining. And those are available free to child care providers in the state. They've been really well attended and been very successful, so that's been really exciting. I really was interested in establishing learning communities in our state. I think Nemours calls them learning collaboratives, but we use the term learning communities because I really felt the need to provide some training to child care providers on how to implement healthy eating and physical activity in their programs. And we did apply as a state, I think in 2013, for funding from Nemours, and we were not awarded funding, but later on Nemours came to us and asked us again if we would be interested. And we were really excited about this, and we had our child care aware folks on board. But as I'll talk about a little bit later, our providers are pretty stressed out enrolling in our state quality rating and improvement system, which is called Early Achievers. And unfortunately, Early Achievers does not include many standards around physical activity or nutrition. So it didn't seem to behoove providers to really get engaged in doing work around healthy eating and physical activity at this time. So we're hoping we can still do that in the future. But one of the other groups that was interested in partnering with us was the Washington Dental Services Foundation, and we have a shared interest in decreasing sugar-sweetened beverage and juice consumption and promoting water consumption. So we've developed with them to develop some drinking water toolkits that we're now piloting, and we hope to have statewide in the next year or two. And hopefully our state regulations will also be requiring programs to serve more drinking water and make it more available to children. One of the big things that happened in Washington State in July of 2015 is the passage of the Early Start Act. And there are a number of different components to the act, but one of the big ones was requiring that we align all of our standards at the Department of Early Learning. So we needed to align our state licensing regulations with our quality rating and improvement system and our state preschool, which is called ECAP. So it's been a huge amount of work for the state. The idea is that it would make it easier for child care programs and staff, and also I think legislators to help understand our system. So one of the things, again, that presented an opportunity for me is, hey, we're going to be looking at our licensing standards, and I want to make sure that I can provide information about how to improve our healthy eating, our screen time, our physical activity, breastfeeding, infant feeding regulations. So I volunteered to be on the writing team, which has been a really wonderful learning experience for me, which meant that I agreed to write a lot of standards that I was not an expert on. And I, again, relied on caring for our children and folks that I work with throughout the state. And I ended up writing regulations around laundry and hand washing and medication management and immunization, just because it was a way to make it a win-win situation, because that also gave me the opportunity to be involved in writing the standards around the areas I was specifically interested in, which were nutrition and physical activity. So that was very exciting for me, and we're sort of moving through that whole process where we're now working on aligning our center and family home regulations, and going through the whole process. They probably won't be finalized until 2018. And our next steps will be working on how we align our quality rating and improvement system, which again is called Early Achievers, and our state preschool system. So one of the other components of the Early Start Act was that it required that where previously Early Achievers had been voluntary, now our quality rating improvement system was going to be required for any provider that accepted children on state subsidy. So that's a huge influx of providers, many of whom are not doing it voluntarily. So it's been a real challenge, and it means that a huge number of providers are coming on to Early Achievers, having to enroll and go through the whole process. So it means that many of them are really overwhelmed, and unfortunately, as I said, our quality rating improvement system does not currently include a lot of healthy eating and physical activity parameters, so programs haven't been willing to jump in and do a lot of extra work really around those arenas. I did want to point out one of the things that really helped us too when we were working on our regulations was when I may have hit some barriers that moving forward some of the regulation suggestions around healthy eating and physical activity. We have a childhood obesity prevention coalition here in Washington State, and they were funded by American Heart Association, and I think it was Robert Wood Johnson. It's called Voices for Healthy Kids. They were funded to work on strengthening child care regulations around healthy eating and physical activity. So they actually met with our state licensing director and shared with her their goals and what they would like to see in the regulations. And our licensing director was really impressed with their presentation, and she emailed me afterwards and said, Adrienne, can you work with our alignment coordinators to see if we can get some of these principles included into our regulations? And it was like, oh, yes, certainly I can. I'm very excited to do that. So that was another really great way of partnering with and collaborating with people in the community. Next slide, please. So this is just a schematic that sort of shows our alignment process, where we're aligning our licensing with our early achievers and our state preschool, which is called ECAP, with our outcome of 90% school readiness, and with professional development being an important piece of that. Just shows you schematically what it looks like. It's been a huge amount of work. Next slide. So I did want to say, because our next phase is moving into early achievers, I really wanted to develop a relationship with our early achievers coaches who are employed by our child care resource and referral networks. And so I recognize that one of the areas that might work well, because our system uses environment rating scale, was to try to work with the early achievers coaches who are helping programs get rated, and to show them how some of the healthy eating and physical activity principles really mesh well with some of the principles within the environment rating scale. So I thought family-style dining would be a really good place to start, because with family-style dining, you have a lot of work on adult-child interactions, on social emotional development, on executive function skills, and those are all components of the environment rating scale. So I purchased some equipment, some serving bowls, some serving utensils, child-sized serving utensils and pitchers, and gave them to Child Care Aware of Washington, who then distributed them out to early achievers coaches across the state. And we got about 81 providers across the state who the coaches are working with to implement plans to start family-style dining in their programs. And so I'm really excited that that gives me an in with the early achievers coaches, and we're just starting to show how there's alignment between early achievers and healthy eating and physical activity. And one of the other really exciting things I think a lot of you will be interested to know is that in Washington State, we've been working really closely with Costco. So Bridget Igo from the Department of Health wrote up a really great letter, and we got it signed by our Director of Department of Early Learning and our Secretary of Health, showing that it's a win-win for Costco to be able to identify products that they carry that meet USDA child nutrition guidelines. So Costco was very excited, and the first beginning of this process is that they went through all the products that they carry and identified which ones met USDA. Actually, we're focusing on smart snacks first, so the school stores food that's sold. They went through other products to see which ones met the smart snacks guidelines. And then if you look at this website, they have listed out all the products that meet the smart snacks guidelines. This is only available on their business delivery website, and their next step is to work on integrating this into the warehouses. And then once they get that going, the next step is going to be looking at the Child and Adult Care Food Program and the guidelines and foods that meet the guidelines that Costco carries for the Child and Adult Care Food Program. And so that will be coming on maybe in the next year. And we're really excited about that, because we found out when we surveyed child care providers back in 2013, the University of Washington Center for Public Health Nutrition surveyed all providers in our state that serve children ages 2 to 5, and found that about 70% of them shop at Costco. So we thought this would really be great if we could identify healthier food options at Costco for providers. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that we are still really working hard on trying to reinstate our previously robust system of child care health consultation, which has really since dwindled, because we recognize that we're asking for more and more, or including more and more regulations around health and more standards around health, and we really need to have consultants in the community that are available to help providers meet those new guidelines. So that is one of the projects we are also working on. We're asking for some funding from the legislature to reinstate child care health consultation. Thanks.
And
Great, Adrian. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks. Jumping in to keep us moving on time. So here in Maryland, as I mentioned, we have used the Spectrum of Opportunity, and really this framework has informed our state health department collaboration with the State Department of Education, which is the state agency responsible for child care licensing and CACFP implementation in Maryland, as well as other state child care partners, such as the University of Maryland School of Medicine, which has really helped support a lot of the evaluation and survey work I'll talk about in a minute, the University of Maryland Extension, and the Maryland Family Network to really look at improving the nutrition, physical activity, screen time, and breastfeeding policies and practices in our child care settings here in Maryland. And this ongoing collaboration has focused on key activities and accomplishments noted here on the slide that do align with the spectrum. So in looking at licensing and administrative regulations, in July 2015, the Maryland State Department of Education implemented changes to Maryland's child care licensing regulations for screen time activities and nutrition and food served. These improvements supported enhanced alignment of our state regulations with the Caring for Our Children standards, as well as the IOM physical activity recommendations. These regulation changes resulted from statewide legislation passed in spring 2014, which required MSDE to review healthy eating and physical activity practices. The regulation change process was multifaceted and resulted largely from legislatively mandated work groups and task forces, state statute requirements, and the need to bring greater clarification to the regulations. Throughout the fall of 2014, the State Department of Education Office of Child Care reviewed and drafted proposed changes to the licensing regulations, which were then put out for public comment in February 2015 and officially effective in July of that year. So the regulation changes were part of ongoing discussion with the State Department of Education and a statewide advocacy group, Sugar-Free Kids Coalition, as well as other statewide partners who were really a driving force behind the regulation update. In Maryland, all licensed child care providers are required to follow the USDA Child and Adult Care Food Program, or CACFP, guidelines per our child care regulation. Maryland Excels is Maryland's quality rating and improvement system and really recognizes child care and public pre-kindergarten programs that provide services over and above those outlined in the basic standards. Our state health department, DHMH, where I work, has maintained ongoing collaboration with the Department of Education, Office of Child Care, to really support the inclusion of physical activity promoting strategies in Maryland Excel's updated standards, which were released in March 2014, as well as the inclusion of the Let's Move Child Care checklist, quiz, and action plan as a recognition of additional achievement in the field of health and wellness. So programs that select these additional recognitions are acknowledged on the Maryland Excel's website and supported to make program improvements and achieve other recognitions. In terms of professional development and technical assistance, the Child Care Wellness Policies and Practices Project was a statewide collaborative initiated in 2014 to assess wellness in terms of healthy eating, infant breastfeeding, and physical activity practices in Maryland ECE centers. Between November 2014 and March 2015, an online survey was sent to directors and leaderships within all licensed centers in the state, and we had about a 40% response rate with 610 directors responding. We were happy that we did have good geographical representation from all the counties in our state. The Making Wellness Work Through Early Care and Education, a guide for the implementation of wellness policies and best practices in child care settings, was developed to provide an overview of the assessment data. This guide was released at a statewide symposium in April 2016 and is designed for organizations and entities that provide education, training, technical assistance to child care providers and families, such as CCRCs, local health departments, and community colleges. Professional development among these organizations remains a leading strategy and is included, for example, in one of the current USDA Team Nutrition grants, Cooking Up Success, that our colleagues at the State Department of Education administer. And this Team Nutrition grant effort seeks to provide a series of child care provider trainings at community colleges throughout the state. As well, we have integrated professional development and technical assistant efforts in awards that we have administered to local health departments to really support local health department engagement with CCRCs, child care provider associations, Head Starts, and other partners throughout their communities. That's an overview of our Maryland activities.
Great, thank you. And now, Erin, if you could talk about some of your successes, some of the things that worked well and how you accomplished all of that great work.
Sure. Prior to launching the statewide survey of the center directors, we obtained support and buy-in from the Office of Child Care at the State Department of Education. And we really found that this was a key step to obtaining the contact information for licensed child care providers, as well as publicizing and announcing that the survey was available to those folks. The Office of Child Care did that for us through their partners newsletter, which you see a snippet of on this slide. As well, our ongoing collaboration of state partners from health, education, extension, and university has really allowed for priority alignment and coordination of various grant activities, including chronic disease prevention efforts such as the State Public Health Actions or 1305 grant, the PHHS block grant, and MSDE's grant-related activities through Team Nutrition grants and the Race to the Top Early Learning Challenge initiative. The partners from these various groups and divisions routinely work together to support grant proposal development and submission and to really build upon the lessons learned and further the reach and impact of our efforts throughout the state.
Great. Adrian?
So can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. I'm always worried now.
Yes, you're here.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay. So I think what worked well for me really was, partnering and being a team player. And I think since I'm actually in the, education setting, it was really important for me to become a partner and a team player within my agency and be willing to do a wide variety of tasks. And I think really focusing on integrating healthy eating and physical activity best practices into things that are currently happening in my agency made a big difference, and I was lucky that many great opportunities came my way in terms of our pre-professional curriculum and rewriting our state regulations came my way. I also think it's been really critical for me, as I'm this lone person in a education agency, to really have great partners and with other state agencies and in the community. So I mentioned like working very closely with the Department of Health and really closely with our Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition folks. So really reaching out into the community and gaining support from others made a big difference for me.
Great, and some of the challenges.
So the challenges for me really came around funding. As I think I mentioned, our initiative, the Healthiest Next Generation initiative, funded the 3 positions in the 3 state agencies, but didn't give us any additional funding to really do any activities. So that has really, required me to do some partnering with others. Like I mentioned, the drinking water toolkit with the Washington Department of Early Learning, the Dental Services Foundation. And that's been really critical for me to do some partnering to get funding. I think timing has been a challenge, and it also relates to community partner readiness. As I said, we have some challenges because so many of our providers are enrolling in our quality rating and improvement system right now, and they're pretty overloaded with training requirements. So that's been a bit of a challenge. And like I said, the whole alignment process is a very huge, complex agency process. And so working through that has been a bit of a challenge.
Erin?
Yes, here in Maryland, I certainly echo some of Adrian's points regarding the challenges, but have really framed this slide based on our data from our statewide survey. While this photo is from a child care center in Baltimore, Maryland, and shows a very low-cost opportunity for academic-based physical activity and inclusion in the classroom, the implementation of physical activity best practices remains a challenge in Maryland. According to the Child Care Wellness Policies and Practices Project data, physical activity best practice implementation is much weaker compared to nutrition and infant breastfeeding best practice implementation among child care centers in Maryland. A few key findings include only 16% of centers meeting the best practice for at least 120 minutes per day of indoor or outdoor physical activity, and only 40% of centers meeting the best practice for teachers incorporating physical activity into the classroom routines, transitions, and plans. Similar to challenges that may occur when proposing dedicated time for physical education or physical activity in schools, when Maryland's regulations were being reviewed and updated in 2015, our partners in child care licensing were not supportive of the inclusion of physical activity best practices with time requirements, such as the 60 minutes of adult-led PA or the 120 minutes of indoor-outdoor time, due to the potential to set up providers for compliance or non-compliance issues. So in talking about these data findings in more detail with some partners, one of our statewide champions, who's an extension educator and a collaborator to these efforts and has facilitated many child care provider trainings, has really shed some light on her observations related to how unfamiliar providers are with developmentally appropriate physical activities, and really facilitating skill development related to some of the physical activities. However, it is important to note that providers are really providing physical activity opportunities that are part of either the 120 or 90-minute per day recommendations and may not always realize it. So really, moving forward, we're hoping to work with providers around continuing to build their confidence and skill in facilitating and leading physical activity without it seeming like it's just another regulation or another thing to add onto their already packed curriculum and day. So those are some of the challenges we've seen specifically around physical activity in Maryland.
Great, and you are not alone. We hear that from a lot of states. Thanks for all of that interesting information, and now we'd like to hear about the next steps for your ECE work. So, Adrienne?
Yeah, so the next steps for us are going to be, continuing to work on the standards alignment process, and since we're kind of coming to well, we're not at the end of the licensing segment, but we are sort of starting to move now into working on our quality rating and improvement system standards, which is where I'm really wanting to get involved and hope that I can integrate some healthy eating and physical activity standards into our current quality rating and improvement system. I think it's going to be a bit of a challenge, and I'm hoping that our Childhood Obesity Prevention Coalition can be of help again. And I think we really would like to, as part of work we want to do around early achievers, it would be really great to establish learning communities. So we have put forward a request for the legislature to fund learning communities. This is going to be a challenging legislative session for us, though, because in our state, we're not fully funding K through 12 education, so that's going to be a big issue. But we did put in a request, and we are hoping to be able to establish learning communities. And I hope to be able to continue to work on collaborative projects with others, such as the Washington Dental Services Foundation and the Department of Agriculture on farm to preschool projects. So I have a lot of exciting things that we still would like to do.
Erin?
Here in Maryland, we've really planned to continue our statewide partnerships and utilize the data findings and recommendations to strategically develop and implement child care wellness activities, including guidance and support for our community level work, which is really led by our local health departments, extension educators, and child care resource and referral centers. And our efforts have greatly benefited from the literature and national reports, Let's Move Child Care, CDC, and other national resources. So we will really continue to integrate these recommendations and best practice findings into our efforts.
Great. We were hoping you'd have some recommendations for other states, so really elaborating on how you were able to carry out this work for someone else in your shoes. We'll start with Washington. Adrienne?
Sure. So again, like I stated, I think really creating win-win situations was really key. And, like I said, partnering. So like the situations where I was able to work on the child care pre-service trainings, our licensing regulations, our work with Costco. I think really just trying to find ways to make it a win-win for everyone involved. And again, partnering. Partnering is, really critical, has been really critical for me, and I think it's really useful and helpful to partner with others in the community.
And just echoing what Adrienne said, it's really important to identify those common interests among the partners. We've been fortunate to have enhanced and built some successful collaboration and partnerships. And as I previously mentioned, we've just been very strategic in working to align all our federal and state-funded activities and initiatives to really support kind of the building upon each one. And our findings from some of those projects have then in turn informed grants we've awarded to local health departments and other partners. It's also really important to commit the time and the resources that are needed with Department of Education and our university evaluation partners. We maintain monthly meetings and other meetings on an as-needed basis, and all really kind of value and know that that's kind of that face-to-face coordination and collaboration is really important to help keep things moving and achieving accomplishments. And lastly, really learning partner language and priorities is important. Sharing communication, important information, and really a mutual responsiveness to the questions are helpful in this area. You know, over the years, I've certainly learned more about quality rating and improvement systems or the race to the top activities when those were going on a few years ago. And that's been really important to help me learn and understand the education setting and gain buy-in from those partners.
Okay, great. Well, thank you guys so much for your presentations. And there have been a couple questions coming in. The first one is, are online trainings available outside of Washington? So, Adrian, I believe you mentioned online professional development trainings, and someone in the audience is wondering if they're available outside of Washington.
Yes, I actually think that a couple of states have approached the University of Washington Center for Public Health Nutrition. The contact there is Tori Bradford. They have contacted her. I think Idaho is one of the states that has, to see if there's a way that they can use those online trainings in their states. So I think they're available. I mean, folks can go on the website and find them, but I don't know if they're approved for continuing education credits within each state. I'm not sure how it works in each state.
And I guess this is Carrie. Yeah, and I would just put a plug out to that audience for the Better Kid Care module. So, 2012 or 13, my memory's failing me now, but we worked with Penn State Better Kid Care, and so there are modules approved related to nutrition, physical activity. They're the Let's Move modules, and they are freely available on the Better Kid Care website and accepted by many states. So if you're interested in knowing if your state accepts the Better Kid Care trainings, which are similar, I believe, to those that Adrian mentioned, just email Carrie at CDC and I can let you know, or you can check the Better Kid Care website and look up your state. Another question that's come in are about learning a little bit more about the drinking water toolkit. Seems like people are interested in that. So Adrian, can you tell us a little bit more or how people would be able to view that?
Sure, we're still piloting them, and what we are using are components of a curriculum that the Dental Service Foundation had already created called Cavity Free Kids, and I think that's available to any state also for use. We do have trainers here that train programs on how to use the curriculum, and there is currently curriculum components that address drinking water. But in addition to using that curriculum, we also are using the Potter the Otter book, and we created a drinking water policy that programs could adopt, and we have some handouts for parents and some posters. So we're still piloting it, but as soon as we have it completed, we will probably make it, I'm sure the Dental Service Foundation will make it available on their website, and we'll make it available on the Department of Early Learning website also.
Thank you. We also have another question about what are some resources that you've used to guide your work. So I think you've mentioned them interspersed throughout the presentation, but if Erin and Adrian could just talk about some of your go-to resources, that would be great.
Sure, this is
Adrian. Oh, go ahead, Erin, go first.
Oh, sure, sorry. I mean, I think I've said them just to sort of reiterate. I'm sure a lot of folks are familiar with them. Let's Move Childcare and just Let's Move in general has been a great resource and national platform for a lot of this work over the past few years. Certainly the Caring for Our Children standards and some of the other kind of resources from American Academy of Pediatrics For example, they just in October came out with a new kind of their recommendations and finding on screen time and technology use for early childhood. So while that's maybe not explicitly have the word ECE or childcare in it, you know, those are some tools and resources that can really be incorporated into this work.
Yes, I would agree with those, and I would also use knapsack. That was really useful too for me, and looking at a lot of other states' policies around healthy eating and physical activity was also very useful. I think Minnesota has some great policies. I'm blanking out now on the different states, but I used a lot of other states' information also.
This is Carrie from CDC. I would also just point out some of the CDC resources that we published recently in October. It's called the Early Care and Education State Indicator Report, where we look at 15 different indicators for looking at the state level policy and system support for obesity prevention in early care and education. So looking at things like licensing, how child adult covered food program, obesity prevention. So pretty much 7 out of the 11 areas of the spectrum of opportunity. You could also look at other states to see what types of facility level interventions they're using. So if you're interested in what other states are doing, there's that indicator report. And then also people mentioned the spectrum of opportunities, and the Quick Start Action Guide is on our website.
This is Adrian. I just quickly also wanted to put a plug in for the monthly ECE networking call that CDC hosts. I have learned so much from being a part of those calls, and learning what other states are doing has really helped me, helped inform what I'm doing in my state.
Thank you. Those are the fourth Wednesday of the month from 3 to 4 Eastern Time. If anyone's interested, you can email eceobesity@cdc.gov to learn about them. I think I have one more question, and it was really talking about how you're working with partners, communities, and ECE programs to ensure that they have the resources they need to support healthy eating and physical activity. So if you guys have any insight on those types of support, either ECE programs or how you're helping partners as well.
This is Adrienne. I'll just say one of the things I was able to do on the Department of Early Learning website was to create a web page that was specific to the Healthiest Next Generation initiative, and I'm included on that page. You know, a lot of resources that are available around that for use for child by early learning programs, and there's components of curriculum in there, and there's also some resources for parents. And I really did a lot of blast out to the childcare community to let them know that was available online for them.
This is Erin, and I would just sort of reiterate that the ongoing statewide coordination and collaboration really, I think, helps support the local communities and programs within those communities. We at the State Health Department, our go-to community partners are local health departments. We have a really robust local health department network here in Maryland, which is a huge opportunity for us. And so really providing those partners the resources and information and guidance to help work with child care partners within their communities has been a key approach that we've used, as well as just at that state level and integrating things down with our University of Maryland Extension partners and our statewide organization that oversees all the child care resource and referral centers, the Maryland Family Network. So we've seen some of those partnerships really be helpful and valuable to trickle down and you know, the different state partners reaching their local community partners.
Great, thank you. I'm just scanning. Yes, one more resource that people have mentioned is the Healthy Childcare website, the ECEL we can send out the link. But they have some. If you are interested in model policies, you can look up the model child care health policies. It's a document put out by AAP in its 5th edition. I'm sorry, I'm just looking through the question box one more time to see if I've missed anything. It also looks like Child Care Aware is working on a things to consider piece, looking at the new changes and recommendations on screen time from AAP. So we'll be keeping our eye out for that to help with the screen time, the new screen time. And one other question, as far as licensing, so Washington is under revision and Maryland is completed. Is that correct?
This is Erin. Is your question, Carrie, in terms of having gone through some regulation updates?
Yeah.
Yes, we have. And again, it was, a portion. There's certainly probably other potential opportunities, but this was all resulting from statewide legislation that was really driven by an outside kind of advocacy groups, Sugar Free Kids Coalition, and that resulted in regulation updates. Mm-hmm.
Adrienne?
So we're in the midst of revising our regulations. It's quite a long process. Right now, we're at Washington State. We've kind of completed the alignment of our family home and well, I shouldn't say completed. We've completed the writing portion of the aligning family home and center regulations, but now our state's actually weighting the regulations, so they're determining, if there'll be a different weighting level for different regulations depending upon how they impact safety and health of children. So that's a whole process that we're going through, and then there'll be a process of, we have a state, a union for our family home providers, and so there'll be an opportunity for them to comment on the regulations, and then they'll be open for public comment, which is why our new regulations probably won't be in place until 2018. But they'll probably have nutrition and physical activity practices, best practices included, so that's the exciting part.
That's great. Well, I think, I've kind of come to the end of the question boxes, and we do have the next slide, I think, the panelist information. No, but we can get it for you. I think the easiest way to get more information from either myself or the panelists would be to email CDC's ECE Obesity mailbox, which is eceobesity@cdc.gov. So if you have questions or want to know more from the speakers, please feel free to email that mailbox. We'll give you 6 minutes back in your day. We really appreciate everyone's participation and hope that you can fill out that survey and share the recording with those who might have missed the call. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and we'll talk to you on our next session.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.